Let's answer a few questions before we wrap up this Monday edition of PFT PM from the mailbag. Any update on the Chiefs stadium decision? What are you hearing is most likely? Look, it's down to Kansas and Missouri. And the Chiefs are going to have to make a decision at some point. They asked for more time. In Kansas, the deadline was June 30. I don't know that they've officially granted an extension, but hey, if you want the Chiefs, you're going to keep the window open. And for the Chiefs, it's very simple. A $1.15 billion renovation of Arrowhead Stadium or a $3 billion or so dome stadium in Kansas that possibly brings a Super Bowl to the region. And the Chiefs have said they'd like to have a dome stadium. I'm sure the fans that got frostbite on that night that the Chiefs hosted the Dolphins in the wild card round of the playoffs would have wished that game was inside of a dome, but I digress. Or I don't. That weather advantage. Hey, that's a very different game if it's Dolphins at the Chiefs and it's 72 degrees. Dolphins have a better chance to do what Dolphins do in 72 than if they're playing in whatever it was, minus 20, minus 10, minus 15, dangerously cold, frostbite galore. You're giving that up if you go indoors. But you're getting a Super Bowl. You're getting a new stadium, state-of-the-art, keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody's got to have that new stadium. Got to have the new best in class for this, that, or the other. So I think that for now, they're just going to try to get the best possible deal. Keep leveraging Missouri against Kansas and Kansas against Missouri. Get your best possible deal and then call the ball. But I think they'd probably like to go to Kansas deep down. Deep down. If they can come up with whatever their contribution is going to be, which means maximizing the public contribution and paying as little as possible, because they pay a lot less for a renovation of Arrowhead. They're going to pay more for a new stadium, but it may be a lot better in the long run, and they may make more money in the long run, especially because the dome stadiums can have events all year long. Red Zone UK, a.k.a. Tom Marshall, does the NFL's access to the gambling company data enable it to suppress any crisis before they happen? You know, I started down that path when we were talking about the latest NBA scandal. God, I already forget the name of the player who's being investigated by federal prosecutors. The Eastern District of New York, by the way, headquartered in Brooklyn, that's become kind of the hot spot for all of these gambling investigations. Multiple, all the way back to Tim Donaghy, multiple gambling investigations by the federal authorities have originated in the Eastern District of Virginia. Malik Beasley. I think that's right. He's the guy who's currently being investigated. And, you know, when we were talking about this last week, I mentioned that the NFL's pivot from hating gambling to loving gambling includes this clunky justification that, well, we need to be in business with the sports books so they can tell us when our guys are betting when and where they shouldn't be betting. Okay, fine. But that relationship also creates the potential for the NFL doing this. No. We don't want, we don't want to hear about that the day that Bijan Robinson was sick, but they didn't tell anybody he was sick, that there was an unnatural amount of betting activity on his unders for that day. We don't need to know that. We don't want any threats to the integrity of the game to come to light. Even if they're there, see, they can be there, but if you manage to keep anyone from knowing about it, is it really a threat to the integrity of the game? It's the tree that falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it. I hate to be that cynical, but I think it's more realistic than anything else. And I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything. I'm just saying if you've got these relationships, these very cozy relationships where the sports books are paying you a bunch of money, and part of the justification to the world is, oh, we get to find out when guys are betting and they shouldn't be betting. It's one thing to have an investigation into whether or not Calvin Ridley was doing parlays that included the Falcons when he was away from the team in Florida and not even connected to it. He gets busted. Other guys like Jamison Williams, he was betting when he shouldn't have been betting if you're in the facility. Remember that rule? If you're in the facility, you can't bet on other sports. If you walk outside, you can. It's just stupid. That's one thing, to have the sports books rat out the players, which is what they're doing. They're ratting out the players of the NFL because the NFL has that pipeline. That pipeline also can be useful because you can turn the, is that the way it would work? You turn the valve and you shut the pipeline. And we don't want to know about unusual betting activity when, a team has successfully lied about a guy's true injury status. We don't want to know about that. Just speculation for me, not accusing anyone of anything. Callum Simons, did you ever watch NFL Europe and why did it end? I remember when the original NFL Europe came to be. 1991, the World League of American Football was the name of it. And I recall I just graduated from law school. My wife and I, we weren't married at the time. We went to Myrtle Beach for the weekend. It was a quick drive down, 3 days, got horribly sunburned, came back, got home on the Monday night of Memorial Day weekend and turned on the TV and watched the World League of American Football. And it was just like I felt with the USFL in 1983, 8 years earlier. It's football. I love football. This isn't the NFL. And they had innovations like they had a helmet cam that was stuck inside. Remember they had those kind of face masks? They had that face mask style that was kind of different, futuristic at the time. I wanted to be all in with the World League of American Football, and I wasn't. And from time to time, if nothing else was on, I'd watch those games. And it went through various iterations. There were European teams and American teams. And what happened was at the end of the day, it just didn't make enough money, especially after 9/11 and security costs increased around the world, these games being played in Europe. I thought it almost went away, 2002, 2003. And it was eventually in 2007, they just decided, we're not making money off of this. And who cares? Look, I know from time to time people will say, and I've made the case, for a developmental league in the NFL where you can have quarterbacks get reps and get better. You can have officials get reps and get better. Coaches get reps and get better. GMs get reps and get better. Everybody gets reps and get better. And then they come to the NFL and they thrive. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, there's 53 roster spots. At the end of the day, there's 32 head coaching jobs. The owners don't care about properly giving people experience. They go out into the crucible of competition and the best ones win the jobs. It doesn't matter whether you're some great story about a guy who was bagging groceries at the Piggly Wiggly and got enough reps in NFL Europe to finally thrive in the NFL. It doesn't matter. Somebody's going to play quarterback for the St. Louis Rams in 1999. It ended up being Kurt Warner, and it helped that he had played in NFL Europe. But if it hadn't been him, it would have been somebody else. And from the NFL's perspective, they don't care who it is. And if a good story happens to bubble up out of, the primordial ooze of football, so be it. But they're not compelled. Now, if they were making money, they would do it. And they would say, oh, we're supporting the people to have all these second chances and develop it. If they were making money, they could say whatever. They would do it if it would make money. If a minor league was projected to make sufficient profit to justify its existence and also would not undermine the NFL, that's the other problem too. You don't want, if you have an NFL junior, you don't want to take away from NFL senior. But if they thought you could have a farm system where you've got NFL minor league action that's happening during football season, that's the argument I've made in the past. You have a farm system like baseball, and you have teams that run the same offense and defense, and you have players who can come up and they're ready to go. They're all part of the same family, and you pepper them throughout the country in cities that are far too small to justify an NFL team. It would make sense if it made money. And if they thought it would make money, they would do it. But again, you don't want to undermine the local NFL team, the closest geographical NFL team. You don't want fans to be more invested in their NFL minor team than in the NFL major team that the league wants people to support. Paul Flanagan, are you going to Dublin for the Vikings-Steelers game? You know, when the schedule first came out and it was Vikings back-to-back, Ireland against the Steelers and London against the Browns, Matt Casey suggested that we possibly go over for the week. The problem is Sims can't do it because Sims does college football. And I don't want to go there without him. I don't want it to be just me. I think he and I need to go there together. Ideally, it's something we do in the off season for a week and do a bunch of appearances and shows and get to know the folks there, get to see the folks there. I feel like I know a lot of them that I hear from via email. We'd love to go over there. It's just during the season, it's too hard to do, especially because Sims does college football. And I'm not bitter about that. I'm just being realistic. I think he'll be back down to, 1 day a week, 2 days a week once the season starts. Get ready for that. Don't complain. Don't complain. You have fair warning that that's what's going to happen. And last year it worked out fine. We had Devin McCourty, we had Michael Hawley, we had Rodney Harrison, we had the full rotation, and it worked well. It actually made me enjoy the thing that I used to hate, the Joint Mega Picks podcast, because Chris and I would do 2 hours on Thursday morning, and then boom, we'd go right into that after like a 1 hour break. 3 hours of each other is a little much. And since I don't have access to him as much as I usually do, that's a nice little bonus. So the Picks podcast is a lot more fun when Chris isn't available. But that's the bottom line. He's not available to make the trip. I don't want to make the trip without him. I think it's something we need to do together, and I think we'd have a great time if and when that ever happens. Last one from Wasp49. Do you think Jon Gruden will coach in the NFL ever again? I don't know, because there's two complications for Jon Gruden. Complication one is the thing that caused him to leave the Raiders during the 2021 season. The emails that were leaked by someone to the Wall Street Journal, and then when that didn't get him to walk away, the second batch that went to the New York Times, that did the trick. Inappropriate emails that he sent years before he was the coach of the Raiders. He was working for ESPN at the time, communicating with Bruce Allen, who at the time was the GM or executive VP or whatever of the Washington franchise. That's one potential impediment. The other potential impediment is his ongoing lawsuit against the NFL, which is still pending before the Nevada Supreme Court on the question of whether or not he's going to have to go to the secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration or be able to litigate in open court the question of basically who ordered the code red, who took him out with these supposedly secret documents from the Washington investigation. And as I've said many times, it's an important question because somebody undermined the integrity of the 2021 season by taking him out 5 weeks in. They could have done this in June and given the Raiders a chance to hire a coach for the 2021 season, or they could have said, we're going to wait until after the season. We're not going to undermine the integrity of the season by forcing this guy out 5 weeks in. They still made it to the wild card round and almost beat the Bengals, who went to the Super Bowl without Jon Gruden. What would they have done that year if they would have had Jon Gruden the whole year? And if you have people betting on, the Raiders making it to the Super Bowl, you've undermined the integrity of those bets by taking him out when you did. I still have a problem with that. But my point is this. I think the first thing would probably not be an impediment if somebody wanted to hire him. The second thing, that makes it a little harder because of the thing we talked about most of the week 2 weeks ago. The very basic reality of collusion in the NFL and not making the league unhappy with any specific team, not doing anything the league doesn't want you to do. I have a feeling that the league would frown upon someone hiring Jon Gruden to be a head coach. Now, he's done some consulting. And as it relates to the first thing, I talked to somebody who is in a position to know. And I was told that, most players, when they hear about the Gruden emails, they just kind of shrug and they say worse stuff all the time in the locker room. It's no big deal. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think it would be easier for a team that wanted to hire him to get around that than to get around the thing that, you may have some angry folks up to the very top of 345 Park Avenue if and when someone would hire Jon Gruden to be an offensive coordinator or a head coach again. And I think offensive coordinator would make sense. So we'll see how it goes. And a lot of it depends upon that lawsuit. And maybe they could settle that lawsuit and he'd get back in. I don't know. But remember, it was a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a story, I think, from ESPN that his desire was to burn it all down, that he wants to go after the NFL. I mean, if he's still got that attitude, it's hard for the NFL to give anyone the nod when it comes to Jon Gruden. All right. And before I go, I didn't mention this off the top, but I'm aware, as we all should be, of what's going on in Texas. It is incomprehensible. There was flooding up in my hometown a few weeks ago. It was nothing like what happened in Texas on the Guadalupe River. 30 feet it rose in an hour. Those poor girls that got washed away from the camp that they were at, dozens dead. The number changes every 10 minutes, it seems like. And they're still finding people. You never know what you can trust on social media, but I saw yesterday they found a couple of girls 27 feet up in a tree. So they're still intensively trying to locate survivors. Some of the videos I've seen, your brain doesn't even want to process it. And it's amazing. And it's the power of water. I've seen what flooding can do, but not like that. Not like that. And hopefully it is a 100-year event. I saw it downplayed by someone yesterday as being, nothing we really could have prepared for because it's a 100-year event. I hope that's the case, because I hope we don't see stuff like that on a regular basis now. Regardless, it's impossible, if you are a human being, not to be affected and moved by the stories of bravery, the stories of loss, the stories of agony. I was watching one of the cable channels over the weekend, and the reporter said that as he was there, a father showed up, basically screaming into the void his daughter's name. He wasn't going to find her. But what else do you do if that's your child? That you leave at camp without even the slightest inkling that something like this would happen. So this is the escape from all that stuff that we have to carry around, but it's just horrible. And there's nothing I can say that would even begin to address the situation properly. Good for the Cowboys and the Texans to contribute $500,000 each. And if you are so inclined, we have the links on the website in that story about the Cowboys and Texans donation. If you want to provide some money to the Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, to help with relief efforts. When you see the images, it's obvious there are going to be needs that will not be met, cannot be met by whatever public money is available. So if you're inclined to donate, please do so. That is it for today's edition of PFT PM. We'll be back tomorrow with another all-new edition. Until then, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Hashtag no days off. Hashtag except when we take days off. But we've had a good streak going of PFT PM, and I fully expect to keep it rolling through this week. Thanks again. See you Tuesday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.